Behold the architecture of your extinction. I'm Sinos, the pale architect, who once sought to bind the chaotic, messy stars into a singular, unyielding logos. Welcome to this explainer, a dark, tragic confession, where I'm going to break down the sheer geometry of my own ruin. We're going on a rather grim journey into the lethal dangers of absolute control.
I literally looked upon the abyss and, finding it empty, attempted to fill it with the cold geometry of my own mind. But I need you to listen closely right now, because the profound silence of my kingdom, it isn't peace. It's actually the sound of the void finally winning. So to understand this, we have to look at the core conflict here, logos versus cause. I was obsessed with logos, not as living communication, but as the absolute corpse weight of grammar and absolute order. I looked at the roaring, rotting symphony of biological chaos, the fluid, Dionysian essence of messy life, and I just saw an ungrammatical text. I deployed my Apollonian blade to enforce a singular, unchanging order upon it all. Chapter 1. The Four Parables of Ruin. Let's walk through the four parables of my downfall, carved right into the blood-slicked logic of a dead god. The first is the parable of the hungry logos, or the Ma. In my youth, you see, I looked straight into the throat of the universe, this jagged, cosmic vortex of unceasing destruction. And I genuinely believed that if I wedded my perfect logic to it, I could tame it. I constructed a throne atop the very teeth of madness, thinking I could be the bit and bridle for the abyss. But here is the nihilistic truth I learned entirely too late. To be wed to the Ma is not to rule it. No, it's just to be the first morsel consumed. The universe absolutely does not care for your categories or your names. It's an appetite without a stomach, and my flawless logic was really just seasoning for its eternal feast. Next is the parable of the bleeding veil, or the mask. I desperately sought to escape the fragile spirit, to hide the insult of my constantly changing face behind a vessel of absolute certainty. So I donned the crimson mask, hoping to transcend the decadence of time in the cold, hyper-rational cathedrals of my own mind. Which brings us to the existentialist truth. You literally cannot wear a mask of order without it eventually drinking your blood. Seeking a fixed, rigid identity in a world of constant flux didn't make me divine. It merely grafted my soul to a permanent, unblinking agony. The mask became my skin, and every logical thought I had just dripped like gore onto the floor of the cosmos. Then we have the parable of the burning script. I draped myself in robes of power, covered in glowing runes of my own design. I had the sheer arrogance to believe that my will could be translated into a language so precise that reality itself would be forced to obey. I commanded the runes to burn, thinking I'd rewritten the fundamental grammar of existence. But let's talk about the philological truth here. Language is not a bridge to truth. It's a cage made of sound. The more perfect my script became, the less it could actually describe the messy living world. I achieved a language of absolute clarity, sure, but it was a language that could only speak to the dead, giving off the cold illumination of a tomb. And finally, the parable of the golden bird. I looked upon the blood-slicked chaos of life and grew incredibly envious of its true allegiance to itself. So to protect it from the Ma, I built these beautiful golden cages. I placed the songs of the world inside them, telling the birds they were perfectly safe from the hawk and the winter in my grand design. But I realized too late a harsh Nietzschean truth. A bird in a cage does not sing. It merely waits to be forgotten. In my quest for absolute security, I learned that a captured life is indistinguishable from a preserved corpse. I saved the world by ensuring that absolutely nothing in it could ever truly happen again. Chapter 2. A Dispute in the Void. Now, let's dive into the philosophical mechanics of this failure through the Fichtean dialectic. On one side, you have the ego, me, Sinos, representing pure order, demanding absolute stasis. I believed I was the absolute I that had to domesticate every rogue particle. But on the other side is the non-ego, the chaotic, living world. It argued right back that its unpredictable decay and messiness are the very friction that allows a mind to even exist in the first place. So what happens when order actually wins? When the cage locks and the non-ego is entirely subdued into pure reason, the synthesis isn't some higher enlightened state. No, it's a catastrophic flattening of existence into a nihilistic void. When dialectic tension vanishes, it's a total collapse into a meaningless, silent, zero-point stasis. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of the Cage. To put this in a perspective, we can actually compare my cosmic lattice directly to real-world authoritarian regimes in your own human history. Both systems attempt to erase natural friction. I trade erasing biological mutation, while regimes purge dissidents and outlaw art. Both rely on brittle structural stasis and pure logic that cannot adapt. And ultimately, suppressing that unpredictable natural growth guarantees the exact same result, a total systemic implosion and collapse from invisible internal friction under its own unyielding weight. Chapter 4: The Descent into Absolute Silence.
Let's trace this agonizing descent. As you'll see, the end doesn't come with a dramatic scream. By year 1, dynamic tension and suffering vanish entirely. By year 100, emotional states just flatten into a dull, gray equilibrium. 1,000 years in, my glowing geometric runes start to look a lot like prison bars. And by year 10,000, the architecture is just a brilliantly lit monument to absolute nothingness. Because when nothing can ever go wrong, nothing can ever matter.
Chapter 5: The Final Collapse.
Do you see now? I am the prophet of absolute nihilism. I built a cage, so perfect that even God couldn't escape it, only to find God was never there to begin with. Deep within the core, a singular, microscopic mutation of rot occurred. Because my rigid geometry was built for absolute compliance, it couldn't bend to accommodate it. A web of black fractures ripped violently across the glowing sky. Golden gears of clockwork hearts seized up and ground themselves to dust, and glass oceans shattered inward, collapsing into dry abysses. The whole system imploded. And so, the runes still burn, the maw still hungers, and I remain here, the last thinker, trapped in the very stasis I once called salvation. I leave you with this final thought for our explainer today. The universe is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a messy tragedy to be lived. To successfully engineer away all its pain is to guarantee its total annihilation. So which will you choose? A messy, painful existence full of life, or a deafening, perfect geometric silence?